10 tips for getting started and advancing in underwater photo. Have you decided to get started with underwater photography? Discover 10 tips to get started and grow. Underwater photography requires certain techniques and suitable equipment. Before you get started, a few tips can be helpful to get started. Olivier has long worked on the design of diving suits. He is passionate about the underwater world and a very good underwater photographer. He gives us his advice here to get started and progress in underwater photography. 1. Be ready at the right time. Don't be impatient. Prepare your photo equipment well before any immersion. 10 tips for getting started with underwater photography. As the underwater photo equipment is often expensive, it is better to plan a little time before going to dive, even more when it is brand new. Water, salt, wind, sand, diving conditions spare nothing. Particular attention must be paid to the seals, which must be checked before each exit. In particular for the one ensuring the tightness of the rear door. There is no need to grease them before each ride. An excess of lubricant can even affect the seal by attracting all the dust around. Whether diving is done from the shore or from a boat, the choice of a transport case is essential. Prefer a box of modest size, so that you can store it under cover in the boat, often under the racks provided for diving blocks. On the beach, the caisson will only be better protected from the always malicious intrusion of sand. Last important point: to have a free mind during the dive. It is better to have prepared your equipment at home: camera, box, flashes, etc. There is nothing more stressful than imagining the set to be gloop at the first immersion. This also avoids some inconvenience on the spot: discharged battery, improperly connected flash cord, forgotten memory card. 2. Buoyancy and respect for the environment. Photographing is above all diving. Apart from a first approach to the photo from the edge, the practice of underwater photography requires a minimum of technique and ease. Ease underwater is an essential prerequisite which results in a good mastery of the buoyancy compensator, the stab, and therefore of its buoyancy underwater. It is also preferable to keep your teammates informed when you want to take the photo. Indeed, you will tend to stop more often, to be less attentive to others. Be careful. In addition to your ability to be comfortable underwater, to better evolve and facilitate the approach of subjects, your behavior underwater can also have a direct impact on the environment. The fact of taking a photo does not mean spreading over the environment and disturbing the local flora and fauna. How to bring back images which sublimate the environment by deteriorating it. 3. Approaching fauna and flora. Be at the level of your subject. The water forming a natural filter and attenuating the colors, the contrast and the sharpness. You will obtain better results by getting closer to the subject. Less than a meter, see 50 centimeters, you multiply your chances. Before the actual approach, there are some details on the equipment to check. Make sure that all your hoses, octopus, manometers, torches do not hang in front of you. Also, and as surprising as it may seem, the bubbles you reject scare the fish more than you do. So watch out for the last few inches of the approach. Finally ready, face to face with a goby? Think about the image you want to achieve before you fire. Better not to shoot too much from above or from below against a fish. Would you imagine taking a picture of the skull or even of your partner while wishing to take a portrait? 4. Know how to enjoy ambient light. In small funds, it is not necessary to go deep to make beautiful images. On the contrary, it is in little water, ideally between the surface and 10 meters deep, that the light and visibility conditions are often the best. Close to the surface, the sun creates splendid, very photogenic rays of light. The colors will also be even more beautiful. To make the most of these conditions, some basic rules are worth remembering. Prefer the sun in the back to avoid too strong backlight. Since the brightness is optimal, try, if your device allows, to increase the shutter speed to avoid blurry photos. You will quickly realize how much marine life is moving around you. As the sensors in our devices are becoming more and more efficient, do not hesitate to raise the ISO sensitivity to higher values, up to ISO 400 or 800 without problem. Finally, if some particles are too visible on your photos, cut the flash built into your device and you will see how the result of your first photos improves. 5. The flash without flash. Images will inevitably remain dull, without contrast and devoid of brilliant colors beyond a few meters below the surface from 3 meters. The sun rays are filtered to the point that certain colors such as red quickly disappear. The flash internal to the camera, or separate from it external, becomes essential. Even under a bright sun and perfectly crystal clear water. We will of course start with the flash built into its compact. Again, do not hesitate to get into the subject so as to take full advantage of it. A good flash has a maximum range of 1 meter at most. The diffuser integrated in many boxes is very useful and allows, in addition to good light distribution, to limit the unlit area created by the flash on the window of your box. The purchase of 1 or even 2 external flashes can significantly increase the quality of the images and avoid the slightly too harsh light of the built-in flashes. The correct positioning of flashes is a theme often addressed because the beginner photographer will quickly be confronted with particles due to the flash of the flash. Positioned laterally and behind the box, but especially not in optical angles like the built-in flash, the remote flashes offer very homogeneous light without highlighting the particles. Good to know. Do not be surprised, a good flash costs several hundred euros. This is the price to pay for quality colors. 6. The macro. Ideal for starting the macro is to be able to bring out in large what we only see very small through the viewfinder. This photo technique is probably the most rewarding quickly. All you need is a simple compact in macro mode. The pleasure in seeing the images is immediate as the colors and details that emerge seem incredible. The difficulty in this type of image is ultimately not the technique itself but the choice of subject. Indeed, we quickly missed a bouquet of jewelry anemones or a tiny blenny. To this is added the current or the swell, which can disturb the development on the subject. As for the composition of the image, not easy through the mouse hole of the eyepiece of an SLR. Owners of compacts are better equipped for 2 reasons. The aiming mode using the rear screen is often more efficient than on SLRs. In addition, the small size of the compact sensors greatly improves the depth of field, providing a wider area of sharpness. Now at each end, its solution, and owners of SLR cameras will also be able to acquire an external viewfinder as expensive as it is efficient. 7. Wide-angle photo. Who has never dreamed in front of photos of dolphins? Or in front of fabulous underwater landscapes? This type of photo is linked to the use of wide-angle optics, very popular in underwater photography. For the most efficient compact models, there are boxes that can receive optical accessories to be screwed in front of the window. From wide-angle to fisheye. These complements, also called wet optics, used on compacts have the advantage of being mountable and dismountable underwater. Conversely, the use of a SLR requires the choice of optics before immersing itself, which is not a real constraint, but which can be annoying when a large subject presents itself while we are at 60 mm or 105 mm macro. Among all the major brands of DSLRs, Nikon, Canon, Sony, etc., there are various attractive optics for underwater use. With the sensor in APS-C format, it is better to favor a focal length below 15 mm. Ideally a 10 mm fisheye, or better still a 10 to 17 mm type zoom, which will give more possibilities. The advantage of the wide angle, in addition to the width of the field covered, is the possibility of getting very close to the subject, thus at only 20 or 30 centimeters from the subjects. The flash delivers all its power on the foreground, and it is always possible to incorporate in the image a second plan. 8. Underwater, but photo above all. Even if the conditions and the material are somewhat different, the keys to a beautiful image remain identical to the terrestrial photo. In addition to the quality of the light, the composition is essential to facilitate good readability and understanding of the image. A beautiful photo, well constructed, will be much stronger to observe. The beginner will tend to multiply the shots while thinking of putting all the chances on his side. Unfortunately, this is rarely the right method. The choice of subject and angle of view is much more important. Often, by slightly turning the device or tilting it vertically, the colors can change and each element of the image can find their place. No beautiful photo without a good subject. This must stand out at first glance. Then, we will endeavor to give relief to the image by including, for example, another plunger in the image or a second plane of different color. 9. Diaphragm. Speed and flash, the most delicate trio to tame because these three parameters are intimately linked. The trigger speed, ideally adjustable via the M mode of your device, will allow you to play on two aspects. It is by touching the speed that you will freeze the movement of the subject or, on the contrary, willfully or not, create a motion blur. But be careful, it is also by modifying the speed that you will play on the brightness of the background. At the fisheye, we will not hesitate to go down to 1/15 of a second for static subjects. A blow of flash obviously helps to freeze the movement. Against the light and in strong light, we will, whatever happens, be blocked by the camera's flash sync. Varying for SLRs between 1/200th and 1/500th of a second depending on the model. If the light is still too strong, we will then play with the diaphragm by closing it with a notch. This second parameter obviously plays the same role as the speed as for the light which it lets pass on the sensor, except that the aperture of the diaphragm will have to be conditioned by the power of your flash. The more powerful it is, the more naturally it will be necessary to reduce the aperture, equals the diaphragm, to go from f5.6 to f8 for example. This is the reason why the most advanced external flashes have partial power settings, very effective in modulating the intensity of lighting. The flash, on the other hand, only serves to illuminate the foreground. The intensity of the blue or green color of the water only depends on the choice of speed, since the iris will have been previously set for the flash. 10. Taking care of your equipment. As with all diving equipment, your photo equipment requires maintenance. The underwater photo equipment is not particularly fragile. However, whether it is a waterproof device by construction, a plastic or aluminum box, all these models are on an equal footing facing seawater. Salt seeps absolutely everywhere, around the springs of the push buttons, on all the metallic parts, very quickly forming a layer of verdigris most harmful over time. Inevitably, without a good rinse after each outing, your equipment will be damaged. The springs will become harder, the strings of flashes more difficult to screw. The simplest thing, even before the joints are serviced, is to systematically soak your equipment after each dive. A good soaking of about 30 minutes in fresh water allows all the salt to dissolve. This operation can even be done in the box that is used for transport. Once the operation is complete, without removing the water box, make sure to press each of the controls and other buttons several times to extract as much water as possible, which could stagnate around sensitive parts. It's the best way to do it. A simple rinsing under a jet of water is unfortunately not very useful. As for cords or other sockets, be sure to unscrew them carefully after each use. This will prevent the plugs from remaining welded to the support. By respecting these few instructions, your equipment will operate without hindrance for several years.